Welcome to Making Pondo and Talking Pondo. Talking Pondo is a podcast where we pick out two movies each week and talk about them in detail. Making Pondo is a podcast where we talk to people we've made films with and we discuss all their experiences on set.
And we're back. All right,
Yes.
Marty.
Episode 10.
Yes, sir. Episode 10 of Talking Pondo.
Talking Pondo. To start off, I want to give a sensitivity disclaimer on this episode. One of our movies dealt with some rough topics that some listeners might be off-put by, so I want to put that out right in the beginning. I don't really have much intention of going to that level when we get to that movie, but just on the off chance that anything does take that turn, at least you know this episode might not be your cup of tea based on the choice of the film. So
yeah, it's a fair, I guess, I guess the current terms what trigger warning or whatever, but just fair warning.
Yeah, I would rarely.
It's violence like against it's kind of violence against women, but it's not kind of it is, but
we dipped into something here.
I have some thoughts on that we can talk about later.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, since you brought that up, and let's kind of start that. Let's start off with that movie and get it out of the way.
All right,
and not get it out of the way, but let's do it. Let's talk about it at first.
We watched this week. We watched Road Games from 1981.
Mm-hmm.
What we also watched A Boy and His Dog from
1975. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes these movies you see conflicting reports. Is it 74? Is it 75?
I mean, I think IMDb has it at 75.
I think 75 is about right, which means it was set 50 years in the future, which means it was probably shot in 74.
Right.
Which brings it up to now. We're watching a movie that's set in the future of now. One of the more interesting aspects of this film. So this movie is about post-apocalyptic wasteland, one of the earlier ones, actually.
It is.
And it's Don Johnson running around the wasteland with his telepathic dog companion.
Yes.
Who
is a complete smartass.
Yeah. And they seek out basically women.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Don's like, find me another woman so I can have sex with her. And apparently
the dog can't forage on its own because it has telepathic powers.
Right.
And so they have a symbiotic relationship with each other.
Right.
This is written by Harlan Ellison. Do you have thoughts on Harlan Ellison? I don't know if I've ever actually read his stuff. I know of him, but
I mean, Harlan's I haven't read a lot of his stuff, but he's a pretty well-known sci-fi writer. He wrote a pretty well-known Star Trek episode. He's a great. I don't know about prolific, but he's a celebrated sci-fi writer. I don't know that that I haven't read the book, so is that aspect of it in the book? Well, I don't know that.
From what I understand, and I think it was the more interesting part of the movie to me, was going down the Wikipedia rabbit hole about the film itself and things that happened after the film. That apparently Harlan Ellison really initially hated the ending of the film because he thought the very last lines of the movie came off very chauvinistic. But then I also hear that the books itself have a fair level of chauvinism as well, which you would almost think it probably would because the story itself is it's bleak. Basically, audience, we dipped into nihilistic cinema this week, I think. It's a bleak film. And some people like nihilism in their movies. To me, it's a little... It's not Cannibal Holocaust. It's not something like that. But I felt like we dipped our toes so slightly into that nihilistic film genre where, to me, it's like, I feel like this film hates humanity in a way. And I've seen a few other movies in my lifetime that I'm just like, somebody had a weird life to end up putting this on film. And also there's the times too. This is a 50-year-old movie, it was probably very cutting edge, satirical in the 70s, and maybe some of that context has fallen away over the years, or maybe I'm just putting it under too much of a microscope through 2024 eyes. But wow, it makes it seem like, remember back in the day, you'd have the arguments with Ugly from the Ugly Truth, this public access shit, guys, where he said, well, if a person is raised and they're not around anybody in a civilization, they're not going to have any morals or blah, blah. And we're like, no, bullshit. You're going to be, because where does civilization come from? So you get this whole chicken and egg thing. And this movie is, we are nihilists. We believe in nothing. That's kind of what I got from it. But maybe it's like a Tales from the Crypt story, if you look at it like that.
My first note on the movie was literally starts off with a bang. Like the first images of the film are of the bomb going off. And
yes, it's a nuclear war movie. Yes.
And it's a great way to set up a post-war movie. And there's a line in it that clearly gives you the fact that you're about to sit through a satire type film. And the line is, politicians had finally solved the problem of urban blight, by basically blowing everything up. And and to me, the dog's entrance is great because they don't, you just hear this voice in this guy's head for a while, and then finally you realize it's a dog. Here's a thought that I had a little bit into the movie is that, like, yeah, he's using the dog to seek out women to have sex with. And if the sex was consensual, it wouldn't be a problem. It's the fact that it's not consensual at all. And in fact, there's a line in here where he says something about, like, he finds a dead girl and he's mad because they killed her before he could have sex with her. And it's just like, whoa, that is rough. However, if you kind of, it's very much a product of its time. And if you kind of push that aside, I thought a lot of the movie was really well shot.
Oh yeah.
It's obviously a one camera film, but like the cinematography is really good. There's just enough of that kind of zhuzhing up the set to sell everything without having to build these entire kind of wasteland.
Oh yeah, they knew what they were doing.
They really knew what they were doing technically to make and I thought it was a really pretty, like, the acting's good, the coloring of it's really good. One of my notes was wandering the wastelands with a boner and a dog you can talk to telepathically. Like, it's just
bizarre premise.
It's almost like
movie.
It's almost like a teenage sex comedy to me. It's almost like it's a satire on a teenage sex comedy in a certain way, right? And the character is so oblivious to the whole thing. Like, he thinks he falls in love with this girl. She takes him down to the underground, and it's a trap. And his way to pay her back at the end is to let the dog eat her. And, like, I'm not trying to spoil the movie, but
there will be spoilers.
People. I get it. It's like the violence against women, and it's not good.
But it's just showing that all of humanity is.
I think so. Like, I think so. Like,
I think too, and like you said, it even points out, like, the people from the underground want the fertile male from the above ground, and all the fertile male from the above ground wants to do is have sex. Why can't these two sides
work? Why can't these two sides work together?
That's why everything got nuked in the first place.
Yeah,
so there's
exactly.
Higher, but it's, what is your level of ick going into the movie? And for me, I'm just sat there quite bored for a lot of it, and then kind of grossed out on some of it too.
Wow. To me, considering stuff like, I Spit on Your Grave.
Well,
fucking Jodie Foster got a fucking Oscar for The Accused. I don't think. I'd rather watch Boy and His Dog 9 times over than watch The Accused. That's a brutal fucking movie to sit through.
I don't want to watch either one of them.
I hear you. Well, you make a good point. Yeah, I hear you.
I had to make a decision,
No, yeah. And also, there was a joke about Kennedy, which made me think, like, is this the kind of a satire on the result of the Cuban Missile Crisis?
It's an alternate timeline where Kennedy's assassination is foiled.
right.
And this is what happens.
The Cuban Missile Crisis happens and all that, you know, or not even the Kennedy assassination is foiled, but the Cuban Missile Crisis doesn't work out right.
Mm-hmm.
The bombs go off.
Yeah.
And then people are coming out of their shelters, right?
And
Which is what that is.
When I read through Wikipedia about the novella, I guess it is. If I'm wrong, let me know, people. I'm sure they will if anybody's listening. That I guess it was a thwarted assassination attempt on Kennedy, and that's where you're getting an alternate timeline.
Mm-hmm. It makes a lot of sense. That's definitely how it felt. Set in Phoenix.
Oh yeah, that was interesting.
That was interesting. Yeah. We're just wandering the racelands looking for Punani. It was, you know, was one of my notes. And the camera work is good. It's clear, it's clean. It captured the desert and the big sky. I felt like maybe George Miller stole the guitar player thing in Fury Road.
Very interesting that you bring that up because what this movie eventually led to was the polar opposite, was Fury Road. Mad Max Fury Road, because Mad Max and the Road Warriors set design was, according to the Wikipedia article I read, highly influenced by this movie.
I believe it. I believe it.
They pulled the thing. They're like, we're going to take that and we're going to open it up more. But this is like the one that kind of
This idea of trading canned food so you can go in and watch a movie was very weird to me and kind of interesting, and is very unique. The movie's very singular. That's one of the other things that I can say about it is, like, you're not going to see another movie like A Boy and His Dog. No. Maybe Omega Man. Maybe there's a couple other weird type of these.
The weird.
There's a couple of more of these post-apocalyptic sort of weird society movies. You know, Soylent Green. Things like that, but this one's very, very unique in that.
I think this is the one that, much like I Spit on Your Grave and Raging Bull, to me it's more towards that. Oh, I'm just watching shitty things happen for a while. The nihilism thing I talked about.
Yeah, my note was like,
there's a place for everything in cinema.
The cinematography makes it engaging, like it's drawing you in to watch it, but it's a creepy story. It's a creepy little story.
So I was like, oh, this is like a Tales from the Crypt episode.
But I also felt like the movie was playing to the audience and to the theater owners. Like, at one point, the dog's like, I want popcorn. Can't watch a movie without popcorn. You know, and it's like, come on.
Yeah.
There's a line in the movie where he says that charity is the thing of the past, which is kind of clearly evident in that movie. All through it, nobody's looking out for anybody in that movie. Everybody's out to get everybody in that movie.
Oh yeah, this is more of that bleak pre-Star Wars sci-fi. Like, it's interesting to contrast this with Dark Star, where that was goofy nihilism. We care at the last second. This one is like, nobody seems to care at all. Something in the air in that early 70s, right? Because
nobody has any redeeming qualities in the movie. You know, I mean, the lead guy's a rapist. The dog's pretty dark and, you know, humorless. The people that he meets are awful and trying to kill him or milk him for his sperm. I mean, it's it's just like, oh, good Lord, you know.
Shades of 2000 Maniacs with the hillbillies fucking killing people and Westworld robots, you know.
Yeah. Let's see, what else did I have? Oh, it's not that unusual. Back in Oklahoma was a great line. I was made me funny, made me scream. They also kept bringing up this idea of screamers, which I thought was really effective, but you never really saw them. So that was kind of like,
it's in the book, but it's only mentioned.
Yeah, smartly done. The story kind of gets muddled in the second act. You know, why are we fighting? What's going on? You know, it you know, like a lot of these type of movies back then, it sort of it runs on a premise, and at one point the premise kind of it's a drive-in movie. It's honestly, I think it looks really good for a drive-in movie, a one-camera drive-in movie
too. So I don't know if people might not want to watch dog fighting, even if it's not that.
Oh bad. Yeah. Well, there's two dogs.
Like, oh my God,
that's a good point too.
What isn't this movie doing?
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah, it's one of the things I said is it's a decent indie flick. Like you can argue about its worldview and its politics and its thing that
Oh
it's
yeah, but
doing,
you can't
but it's
argue
well,
it's
you can't
crap.
argue that it's really it's craft. It's really well made film.
And the guy who directed it, uh, I can't remember his name. I didn't write everything down. Well, I probably should have. Be a little better if I did a little bit, just a little bit more research. Uh, I think he did a lot of westerns, but he was an actor, and this was the
Mm-hmm.
one time that he directed and independently financed this movie, which makes total sense. Is why nobody was telling them what to put in this movie and what not to.
Yeah,
Right? This
yeah,
is total
yeah,
indie,
mm-hmm.
where it's like everything flies in it.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
thought that
Well,
was
and,
kind of interesting,
I
where it
mean,
was like, oh, this is like some old school, like John Wayne type dudes making a sci-fi bleak movie in the
I mean,
70s.
we'll, we'll come across
Interesting
these.
historical artifact, definitely.
As we come across these films, like again,
Me
I haven't
either.
seen
I,
this
I
movie
was like, oh,
since
this is going to be like Psychic Dog, right? And then I'm
exactly,
like, oh my
exactly.
God, this is going to
Yeah,
be a fun
yeah.
conversation. But then as
That's
it went
exactly what
on,
I thought.
I still have more stuff that I think is interesting to talk about it
I do
too.
too. I do too. I do too. I, but yeah, I hadn't seen it in so long, and I think one of the things that I think is important to say is we're going to come across more films like this because in the '70s, the way women were treated on film in the '70s is a complete flip flop from what any I mean, you go look at a Peckinpah film from the '70s, and you will see some real violence towards women. Watch The Getaway, where he, I mean, it's like wow. Uh, these are you're going to come across these films, and not because we want to watch them, but because we just you were like, oh yeah, I hear that's good. Here you
Yeah, I
go.
thought this was, oh, some
Holy
pro Mad Max
crap!
thing. And when I
Yeah.
saw it when I was like 13 or whatever on the movie channel back in the day, I guess I wasn't just paying much attention to it. And so a lot of
Mhm.
things went over my head.
Yeah, I think so
And
too.
I look at it now and it's like, oh my God, I don't remember any of this.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
remember parts of it, of course.
yeah.
How can you
Well,
forget the weird milking machine and all
you
the
can't forget.
mine
Yeah,
people and shit?
yeah.
But
But a lot of that stuff,
yeah,
I mean, a good portion of it's just implied or stated. It's
well,
not.
true. It's not like an explicit
It's
film. It's just got
super
a
graphic or
nasty
explicit.
kind of
Yeah, it's just got a
biting
very
look to
nasty
it.
tone
Yeah.
to it. Yeah, 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 yeah. Um, I thought it was well written for the most part. I thought the
Mhm.
dialogue was good. I thought it was funny. The dog's darkly funny.
And
Um,
if they put this out in the '80s, this movie probably would have gotten an NC-17. But in the '70s, you could still have weird shit like, well, we can't let the dog die, so I'm
mhm.
gonna feed you to the dog.
Yeah.
And then the crypt keeper comes out and says, it's like one of those weird, they wanted this, but they ended up getting the revenge
Well, and
over.
it's like I mean, in the second act, you go down that tunnel into Bizarro World.
Yeah, right. The
Uh,
Down Under, which is funny because our second movie is literally Down Under,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it's about a guy and his dog, or a guy and his
Uh,
dingo.
the audio mix during the montage is pretty disorienting. When he first gets down there, it's really well done.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then you get to and Jason Robards, and it's like
The
Robards did
role
a
that was
lot of
shot.
weird movies like this, like Johnny Got His Gun. This
Yeah,
was his weird movie '70s Give Me My Money phase.
Johnny got it. That's a very good correlation to this one.
Uh huh.
Johnny got his
hmm
gun. It's
hmm
more of that. Oh well, that was
Yeah.
bleak.
hmm And that's when you find out, of course, she's Robards' daughter, and she's the bait, and you know, it's just to me, it's mainly just it felt so much like satire, like
Oh
especially once
yeah.
you got down to underground, it was just like this is so I can't. I'm having a hard time taking any of this seriously. It's so satirical, but and I'm not apologizing for the trying to by saying it's satire. That's not what I'm saying. It
No, no,
felt
you're right. You're right. It is a satire film. Hmm.
yeah, it felt very satirical.
I mean, it's
It
look, it's
it
right around
remind
bicentennial, right? So they're having all that America parody stuff in it.
I had a serious flash to Gene and Fred's Bible movie. That's what this like at
Oh
points
wow.
where I was just like, that's what this feels like, where they're making fun of everything
Yeah.
while at the same time telling a story. It I don't know.
In a way, it reminds me of not in any kind of story or tone, but Nashville is also here. We are in the middle of the '70s with this satire on America in a way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And they have voiceovers through a loudspeaker in that movie too, because it's a car driving around saying, the politician who's running. But in this movie, you have the loudspeaker of all the, I guess, the brainwash ideas that they're
Hmm.
constantly feeding. I guess that's their podcast in the Down Under.
Yeah, I felt like the coloring was kind of Argento-ish. I mean, they chose some interesting color choices and
Oh,
just lighting things in a certain way.
and I think our second movie has a little bit of a giallo. Is that how you say it? Giallo influence
Shallow,
on its
shallow,
lighting as well.
shallow.
Especially like in that opening scene, all the oranges and the purples. Not to dip into the second movie yet, but since you mentioned that,
No, no. One of my last notes is so fatalistic, and it is.
Mhm.
It's just a fatalistic movie.
Movie about toxic relationships.
Yeah. Let's get another Michael out of the warehouse, and then in the end, the entire question of the entire movie is the girl or the dog.
Yeah, and the dog gets you the girl, so you don't need the dog. But I'm loyal to the dog, which leads to the follow-up stories that were written by Harlan Ellison.
Oh, really? I did not know there were follow up stories.
This
That's
is the thing that I found the
insane.
most interesting. One of them is a short story that takes place right after the events of the movie, where they're continuing heading west, but uh, Vic
Wow.
starts getting haunted by oh, what was her name? My God,
Um.
you think I'd remember
Oh.
these
Oh.
characters' names?
Oh. Oh.
I could
Shoot.
barely remember Vic.
Yeah, I can't remember her name. Sorry. Keep
But
going
yeah,
though.
he starts getting haunted by her because the dog ate her, and now she's like residing in the dog or something. And so it's like, oh, that's weird. And then something happens to where Vic gets cocooned by giant spiders and then gets killed. And now the dog is haunted by Vic as the dog continues off, and the story just ends. And some people say it's because Harlan didn't want to write any more stories about these characters. So, but also some people say it's a response to the way the movie ended. But the book ends the same way, but he says something like "a boy loves his dog" or something was the ending of the book or something like that. It's not they're laughing about, "Oh, she had bad taste, ha ha ha." That's the part that he didn't like apparently.
Ah.
But then
Ah.
this other story apparently where the dog's out there, the dog named Blood, I guess he's named, right? We have Blood, and in the next movie we have uh what oh my God, what's the dingo's name in Road Games? Buford, Busford.
Oh. Gee. Oh.
Either way,
Geez.
they both have key names.
Um.
Hmm.
Yeah. What is that stupid?
I'll get
What
to
is?
that
It's not.
in a moment
Yeah.
here. But
That's not a dingo, by the way.
so,
But anyway.
well, yeah. Spoilers. There will be spoilers. So the dog's out there looking for a new owner to bond with, and then he finds this warrior woman, and then we see that world through the eyes of the woman. And I think this book actually got published somewhere, and that at one point in the '80s they were trying to make the sequel that would have been that movie. But it is kind of weird how eventually you get Mad Max Fury Road.
Yeah. It to me, like I said, I felt
So
this
it's interesting.
weird.
Yeah.
I felt this weird tie to it. It makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, look, overall, I would point to it and say that's a really singular sci-fi movie. You should be prepared. It's got some kind of graphic stuff to it that I just didn't remember.
Yeah,
And
I didn't either. Yeah.
but for the most part, it's a movie worth watching first in the cinematic lexicon,
Mm-hmm.
because it does something a little different that I don't think. I think Omega Man kind of tried it, and some others tried it, but I think that one did it the best. Soylent Green and these other type of
Yeah,
movies.
it's true because you're right. It does take a different approach to, you know.
Yeah, and it leads into, like we've talked about, Mad Max, all that stuff, Fury
Hmm.
Road. It really does. Um, What would you give it star wise?
Uh,
Get the
one,
feeling it's going to be pretty low. One,
one.
really?
Yeah,
One?
I mean, I know it's a well-made movie and everything, but for me personally, it's like, yeah, I'm not going down
It,
this road again. But it's not like a 0 or a half star. I have to give it at least the one
mm-hmm.
for its craftsmanship, and it's an interesting premise. It's just so. I think I might even mention last week. I remember that movie as being kind of ick for some reason. Well, I
Mm.
guess I remembered why.
I
For my sensibilities, just a little too rough for me.
I felt
If
like
I didn't have those sensibilities, I might go 2.5. But
I
for me personally, one. Yeah.
I hear you. I felt like watching it that it was more content than it was action in the film. Like
Mm-hmm.
it talked a lot about it, but you didn't see a lot of it. Like, and I've seen so many horror movies, so many sexist horror, horror movies and bloody things that were just way worse than this. That I really like. Yes, to a certain extent, that stuff is really offensive to right. Like, that's not cool. But at the same time, it weirdly it's about context. You have all
Yeah.
these 80s movies about busting loose and trying to lose your virginity and pursuing women, but when you put it in the wrong context and it becomes this other thing, and suddenly it's
Mm-hmm.
really bad.
That's why I compare it to Raging Bull in a way, because it's like I don't really like that movie either. But
I
then
hear you.
it's a good movie, but it's about like, oh,
I
I'm
hear
watching
you.
awful people, and it's
I
just
hear you.
oh my
Yeah.
god.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think I'm going to give it 3 stars. I think I'm going to give it 3. I don't want to give it too many again because of that content. But I can't overlook its kind of like its singularity. It's really
Mm-hmm.
got some funny bits in it. Um, it moves really well. It's a well paced movie. I think it's a
Oh god, I thought it
140.
was a snooze fest.
I thought Jesus, I thought it was way faster than that. Really? Wow,
Yeah,
interesting. Okay, that's interesting. All right, so 1 for you, 3 for me. All right.
And the weirdest thing about the movie,
Mm-hmm.
Ray Manzarek's one of the musicians. His name's in the end credits. And I go, "Are you fucking kidding me?" And so shortly after the demise of the Doors, he's playing keyboards in this movie, and then I could hear it. I could hear his piano playing as the movie ended. Wow, that was a whole other weird slant
Well,
on this
did
whole
you
thing.
did you see that Brian May did the music and composing
Very
for
interesting
Road
because
Games?
see, I
Yeah.
brought that up to a coworker, and then he pointed out to me that's the Australian Brian May who did
Okay.
a bunch
Okay. I
of
was
voice
wondering if it was
work.
the same Brian May. I
And I'm
was
like,
wondering. That
oh,
makes
okay. I
sense.
didn't know he was. That like it makes sense because he's like, yeah, you never heard any of his, like yeah. I thought
Hmm.
that was very understated for him. But I thought after he did, Flash Gordon, that maybe he was doing more movie scores.
Same. Same.
So
Same.
it's the Ozploitation Brian May apparently.
All
So
right.
we go from the down
So
under
into Road Games.
to down under. A movie that Quentin Tarantino says is one of his favorite films of all time. He said that about a bunch of movies, but apparently he loves
Road Games.
it. Yes.
He said Road Games is one of his
Yeah.
favorite films of all time.
Yes. Yes.
Jesus Christ.
I don't like it
Okay.
that much. I enjoy the film. I don't know if I'm going to go out of my way to overly rave to that extent, but this
So
one,
first,
set this one up. Yeah.
so this is Road Games is about a truck driver who is basically on the road a whole lot, and with his dog that he claims is a dingo, and he spends many hours talking to himself, and he eventually pulls into a hotel to stay the night, and the one room that he wants to get has been copped by a dude, and he starts to kind of watch the guy and realizes that the guy may have committed a murder. And so from there, he starts to get more and more sort of focused on this dude. And there begins to be this whole sort of following him, seeing him. At one point, he's digging in the desert and he's getting, paranoid. He picks up this lady hitchhiker, um, and she gets really panicked by him because he's so paranoid about this other person. And basically it's just about this guy that he's following that he thinks is killing people and how that all plays out.
Yeah, it's Rear Window in a truck, right?
It's the hitcher and Rear Window in a truck, sort of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
proto hitcher. Yeah, definitely.
So right away, a truck driver and his dog. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, and I didn't even realize
A
we
boy,
had
a
two
boy and his
movies about a
dog,
boy and
a
his dog.
truck driver and his dog. That's all I'm going to say right
Wow,
away.
we couldn't
Um,
have matched that better.
uh, it was so. I mean, this film.
Had you seen this before?
No, no,
Oh,
and I will never watch it again.
okay. You had never
I
seen this before.
I
This was
this.
ubiquitous to early cable. I saw this many times in the early 80s. It was
Ugh.
even on network TV as the movie of the week on ABC, I remember.
Of course, it was a movie of the week. It was made for TV. I mean, this movie screams made for TV.
Oh, it played in theaters
No
because
fucking way.
it's an
No
Australian
fucking
movie.
way it
It's
played.
a
Yeah,
foreign film.
no
Yeah.
way. Maybe it played in Australian theaters. No way it got traction in these
Oh, it,
states.
it got the director the job for Psycho 2.
Ugh.
Nobody knows about it because it got forgotten. But my weird history with it was I remembered this movie as a kid where the guy thought he had a dingo and the dog never barked until the end of the movie. And I was always like, what is this fucking film? So you cut to like 30 years later and I find the movie when I'm going through the Jamie Lee Curtis movies, the early slashers. And I'm like, oh, it's this fucking movie. I remember
Well,
this movie now.
and talking about that, Jamie Lee Curtis, she's in this movie for 20 minutes.
Yeah, she's not in it very much. Yeah.
It takes her 30, I counted it, 37 minutes before she shows up in the movie, and she's in it for 15 minutes and then is abducted and shows up for 5 minutes at the end.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, why would you even hire Jamie Lee Curtis at this point if you're just gonna? This is,
It's
yeah.
probably the first movie she made where she actually gets to do a little bit of acting because everything else had been like Halloween or prom night. So it's the first beginnings of like, and then she would put the wig on for Halloween 2 and then do Trading Places. And it was off to the races at that point. But this is that weird anomaly film.
So early on, right? So early on, the killer has had sex with his victim, and she's playing guitar in the hotel room. And this is just a pet peeve, but you can always tell people who can and can't play guitar by
Oh
how they
yeah,
hold
yeah,
the
yeah.
guitar.
I think that scene's
And
ridiculous too.
and it drives me up the like just even I would just take an exercise, but like, look, hold it like this. Just do me a favor. Hold,
Did
just
nobody on
please.
set know?
Don't
Yeah.
just fucking please. Just don't let
Mhm.
anybody know that you can't play guitar. Also, a guitar string garrote is a gruesome, gruesome weapon. Like if you know anything about a garrote, like a guitar string garrote would literally, in my opinion, probably cut the the arteries on the side of the neck, and there'd just be spray everywhere. It's like, let's see that if we're gonna have a killing movie, let's see some arterial spray. But no, we don't see that. We just see the thing go over the head, and then
Yeah, it's definitely more of a thriller than one of the slashers. I think that's what sets it apart from the Terror Train and the Prom Night, because those are all more, I got a knife, pointy, pointy, and this is more like, well, we're just chasing each other around for a bit.
I mean, we spend a good 15 minutes of this movie watching Stacy Keach talk to himself
That
and his
is
dog.
true. It's another actor's movie,
I
right?
mean,
It reminded me of Grosse Point Blank in that way, where it's like, oh, we're just gonna let Stacy Keach you got some monologues you want to do?
I can see why an actor would take this role. He's thinking, I'm going to be on screen by myself for 20 pages. This is awesome. Like any actor would jump at that.
Mm-hmm.
They would absolutely eat that up.
And he also says at one point, just because I drive truck does not make me a truck driver. It's kind of like Grosse Point Blank. Hey, just because I kill people for a living, that doesn't mean that's me.
Yeah, but
I do.
It's funny you mentioned that because I have a note that later on in the movie he looks at the dog and says, "We're truckers, so let's get to trucking."
Yeah,
I
he's
thought
like,
you weren't a truck driver.
now you're switching, huh?
You got the DDTs is a funny line with the old lady, and that this sudden cliff appearing out of nowhere where she's running, and then suddenly there's just a cliff and she's gonna fall into the water. Holy it's like, come on,
because they're
guys.
driving at the bottom of the continent. I never noticed that before. They show the map, and so when they pull out, I'm like, oh man, he's literally trucking along the bottom of the world. Scenically, I've never seen anything else like that.
I guess. The hotel in Yellowdine.
I've never seen another movie about a trucker in Australia. Doesn't make it good, but
the hotel in Yellowdine looks like looks like it looks like a match for the hotel from Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, with all the painting. Like, because these hotels have I don't know if that's an Australian thing out in the bush or whatever, but like in Priscilla, all the walls are painted with these different like themes. It doesn't matter if it's like it's all just whatever, Western or Greek or Italian. It's just every ceiling wall is painted with these, and there's that where he's making the phone call in Yellowdine and he's screaming and all the people are yelling, looking at him. Yeah. 35 minutes in, we still haven't seen Jamie Lee Curtis's character. The guy dragging the boat gag was pretty.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. Why
It
doesn't
doesn't
he care
make
about
any
his
sense.
boat?
Yeah,
I mean,
and
it's interesting visually how they pulled it off, but especially for a movie that you probably know they didn't have a whole lot of money. It looks kind of grainy,
Why drive through the boat?
He just didn't care about his boat anymore.
Yeah.
I guess it's so we could have them all show up at the end and go, he did it. He fucking did this to me. Oh, he did it. But, just because, you take the bag off of Jamie Lee Curtis's head, she says they have their little discussion like, oh, we're going to put a little scene for you.
No, it's not him. It's him.
Oh, well, I guess we better catch the other guy before he runs off.
Where are you going, buddy? Where are you going, buddy? Suddenly,
it's so 1981. Yeah, it does have that made-for-TV vibe when you look back at it.
It's a half-assed script,
film trying to. It's right like Violent Night. You're trying to impersonate an American movie.
At
the same time, it's purposely in Australia too. So
it's just sort of half-assed. Like they just kind of took a stab at it, and like. The dialogue is supposed to be this witty back and forth, but it's just kind of like, would the two of you shut up, please? Just stop talking. That car alarm scene made me want to punch somebody in the face.
Now that went on too long.
It went on way too long. You do not turn a car alarm on in the theater for 3.5 minutes. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it was just because the first thing, and I can tell you this, from working on cars and knowing people who work on cars, is that you disconnect the battery from the friggin' car and to shut off the car alarm until you figure out what the hell's wrong with it.
It's like the guitar playing in the beginning. It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the part of the movie where it starts to drag for me. Even is once she gets kidnapped for snooping around in dude's van when Stacy Keach is in the restroom. We just go off into this dark driving and blah. And I always kind of drift off during that part. It's like, wake me up when they're creeping around the corners for whatever reason, and the truck ends up on top of the van.
I was mesmerized by Stacy Keach's cocaine nostril, so I didn't have a problem staying awake for that.
Well, this was that era.
This is it's just not a good movie. We're truckers, when he keeps saying that he just doesn't drive a truck, doesn't mean he's a trucker. It was terrible.
Wow.
The movie's effort to ratchet up tension or terror, it just kind of fails at every attempt. It's not scary. It's not a thriller. Nothing ratchets up the tension at all. Like this killer is just kind of in the background for a while and then suddenly shows up at the very end and spits on the window, and then the truck runs over his van and it's over with. For me, I just wanted the movie to be over with. It was like watching a movie with my parents in the 80s about some shit I didn't care about. And I'm just like, God, just fuck, let this movie be over with so I can watch something else, please. I'm banging on the table. I'm so passionate about it. So many bad tropes, like the lights in the reefer flickers and then it goes out, but he gives it a good old tippity tap tap and it comes back on. Like, have you ever had a bulb? Have you ever flicked a bulb in your life that went out and had it go, oh, it's back. Okay, perfect. I can just walk away. It'll be fine. No, it's just, he launches the semi on top of the van. It's just, it was just a terrible movie. It was terrible. I did not like it. I did not like it at all. I would watch A Boy and His Dog 15 times before I watched this piece of crap ever again. It was terrible.
I like that the score tried to make it look like he was playing the harmonica in the beginning. I'm like, oh, I never noticed that before. They're really trying to make that magic
Mm-hmm.
there. That's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Uh, I also like that when he's outside talking to the cops and you cut to Jamie Lee Curtis in the truck, she can't hear them. In so many movies, they make it to where she'd be able to hear them. And this one, I'm like, at least she can't hear outside of the. It doesn't make up for the car alarm, but that was one of the
Right.
things where I was like,
Right.
ooh,
No,
they
you
got that
make a good
right.
point. That's a good point.
We had two movies with dogs. One can't bark. One can't talk. One
One
can
can't
talk.
talk. Yeah.
One can
Yeah.
talk. Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, it's another actor showcase movie. So I'm the person on the podcast who likes the bad horror movies. Uh, and as far as when I rank this, obviously
I like,
Halloween is the
I
best.
like a few of them, but yeah.
Halloween is the best of the original Jamie Lee Curtis horror
Well,
films, hands down.
Halloween is not a bad horror movie. You get. I mean, that's
But
Halloween is an
well, I'm
iconic
talking
horror
about
movie.
Jamie Lee Curtis horror films, though. So you
Okay.
got Halloween, you got
Mm-hmm.
Halloween 2, you got
Mm-hmm.
Prom Night, you got Terror Train, you
Mm-hmm.
got this one kind of in a way. It's not. I don't remember.
I don't.
Consider
I
this a
don't. I
horror
don't
movie.
consider
It's
this a
more of a
horror at
thriller,
all.
but
Not even close. It's a
it's
thriller,
still in her
if
early
that.
genre things. And then you also have The Fog. Now, The Fog is
Mm-hmm.
probably the second best one. And she
Mm-hmm.
also gets a little bit more to do in that. But this one, I'd say, for me, comes in third place of those because I think it's clearly a better movie than Terror Train or Prom Night. So if I'm
I'd
going
rather watch Prom Night.
on my scale for what do you give this movie?
A one,
You give this one a one? Okay.
dude. A straight up fucking one.
This is
That
good. We got a opposite thing.
I would salt the earth that this movie lived upon and make sure that nothing ever growed again.
Ah, okay. I'm three and a half.
Oh Jesus,
Uh,
really?
yeah, I like the tone of this movie. I like it more each time I watch it. It's just something I can put on in the background, not pay much attention to. It usually shows up in my Halloween run for the last like decade. So it's probably more of a nostalgia thing because I remember the movie as a
Right.
kid and it was a
Yeah,
good
that
body
makes
film.
sense.
And I
Yeah,
know it
yeah.
has tons of flaws and stupid parts, but and the ending is completely unnecessary where the head falls. I don't think the director liked that either. But there's just I don't know. There's just little pieces of it that it works for me. So, but I know other people it probably there's a reason it disappeared. But yeah,
I watched
more
them
people
back
are
to.
probably going to lean towards your viewpoint.
I watched them back to back, and I just thought Boy and His Dog was clearly the superior movie,
And I think this one typically gets 2 stars, and Boy and His Dog usually gets around 2.5 or 3. You know,
yeah, three. That makes sense. This was not the movie for me. It was just not.
well,
Had
wow,
I
you had never seen that before. Wow, I was
no
wondering. I'm like, did he see this? Because this was
no
on cable quite a bit,
I
so
yeah,
it just swirled in my mind with
mm,
those movies. You know. It's
no.
weird how like Convoy meets. It's like you got your trucker movie.
That's a note I had. Yeah, Convoy.
They kind of met each other in the early '80s momentarily.
Yeah,
There, very
yeah,
strange. Very
yeah.
strange.
Uh, just not just. Look, I mean, it was competently made. Like it looked okay. There were some interesting shots. Who directed that film?
I think his name is Richard Franklin, and I know
Okay.
he went on to do Psycho 2, but
Mm-hmm.
I think much like. And I could be wrong, but I also think like some of the filmmakers of A Boy and His Dog, I think they both come from porn.
That wouldn't surprise me at all.
And sometimes I think the porn didn't go away all the way when they started making some of
Yeah.
their mainstream films. So,
Yeah.
which brings me
Well,
back to our John Carpenter conversation from a few weeks ago to fill for time. I think he's a little different from Wes Craven in some of these other directors because he didn't come from porn; he came from film school. He's a musician. But The Fog is for a later day.
indeed.
The Fog's
Yeah,
a
we
better
don't
movie.
we don't have to fill for time. You know, maybe the listeners will be grateful for a short episode.
All
Who
right.
knows?
We didn't have a
Um,
whole lot to, and it's the thing
I
is, I barely had any notes on either one of these movies. They were both kind of like it's a typical drive-in double feature where it's like, yeah,
mhm.
they
Yeah,
were both kind of there, and neither one of
yeah,
them really made too much of an impact on me. But
yeah,
it's
yeah.
interesting. We finally 10 episodes in landed on some polarizing choices for a change instead of our middle ground because we were like, we just keep doing these 2.5, 2.5, 3-star movies, and
yeah,
finally they got
and
some weird
finally,
ones.
yeah. This one, I mean, this one was one. This one was a tough one for me to sit through. I
I
really
can
did not
understand that.
fucking
I
enjoy
get it.
it. You know, and oh, I'm not. I mean, I'm not trying to be an accusatory. It was just like,
Oh no,
wow,
I can
this
see
is
that.
not my kind of movie at all. You know, it was really bad. And A Boy and His Dog isn't something I really watch that often, but at least when I put it on, I would go, you know, oh, okay, I kind of, again, I felt like they made a lot out of a little.
Oh yeah.
I don't necessarily enjoy the tones of the film at points, but there's a lot more going on than just the sort of violence towards women that's prevalent in
Hmm.
the film. Um,
They're both character pieces. You only have a few
they are,
actors in each.
yeah, yeah, and it's just a weird take. Again, in the 60s and the 70s, there were a lot of those. And I'm not talking about violence on women, but just weird takes on whatever.
Hmm.
There was no telling what you were going to get regarding, you know, a sci-fi film. And they sort of tend to even out in the 80s and be more about the future and in a more kind of, I don't know, like a more general sort of agreed upon,
Oh yeah, you're
you
into
know,
Space Hunter Adventures in the Forbidden Zone before you know it. They're not
yeah,
making The Boy and His Dog. They're also not making road games much past like '83. Once you
true.
get to Smokey and the Bandit Part 3 and Stroker Ace, the
Mhm.
whole trucker movie phenomenon of the '70s kind of went away as well.
Fucking BJ and the Bear in the 80s, dude. That shit
Mhm.
lasted a while, you know.
If somebody who likes trucker movies, would they like road games? or,
Uh,
or would,
you
I
know,
mean,
I think so, you know, possibly. Look, I mean,
how do you
there's
think it compares to Convoy? Because I think Convoy's interesting, but I think that one's a little dull too.
you know, I mean, in the trucker film hierarchy, you've got at the top Smokey and the Bandit,
Yeah,
and then of
yeah.
course you've got that Patrick Swayze movie with the one where he's the trucker,
There's
and then of
Over the
course,
Top.
yeah, you've got Over the Top in there. So it's farther down the list, but I would watch it probably over Convoy, but I haven't seen Convoy in a while either. We may have to bring
Yeah,
that one up.
we just might go down that
Yeah,
Sam
we might have to go
Peckinpah
down that.
because that's a
Yeah.
Peckinpah movie, isn't it?
Jesus, is it?
Weren't we talking about him earlier? So
Yeah, and yeah, Peckinpah.
verify that so the listeners don't have to at us.
Let's see. That's an Ali McGraw, Chris Christopherson movie directed by Sam fucking Peckinpah.
Wow. Next week, Convoy. No, not.
Next week, Convoy on the fucking show. Yeah, that'll come up, guys. It'll come up. We're not going to do it next week, though. However, I do have a pick, and at this point, I kind of would like to jump into something and talk about it for a minute, if you don't mind.
Oh, go for it.
And that is that Mo Henry has passed. And if you know anything about film, or if you know anything about people who made films or cut films, um, you know Mo Henry. She cut most of your favorite. She was the negative cutter for most of your favorite films. I mean, I think she has 400 and some odd credits on IMDb. Just editing. 475. My bad. Her last film that she cut was Licorice Pizza.
Hmm.
She cut Interstellar. She cut Captain Phillips. She cut. Um, I mean, the list is when you dive into the list, it's ridiculous. The Dark Knight Rises, Moneyball, um, Hangover, Arthur. I'm just going through the list here. It's ridiculous. Big films. The Book of Eli, The Blind Side, Zombieland, The Hangover. I mean, she cut so many. The Dark Knight, Get Smart, Hancock. I mean, when you just go through her list, it's ridiculous. The Bucket List, I Am Legend, and these are just I'm just pointing out kind of ones that people know. Super Bad, Death Proof, um, Ghost Rider,
Oh man, so you're telling me that Quentin,
300.
another editor of Quentin Tarantino's movies, is gone?
Yeah,
Damn.
300, Catch and Release, um, the Black Dahlia, Lady in the Water. her list went on. It goes on and on and on. Empire Records. I mean, stuff that you love. She probably, if you love a movie, it's I don't know, maybe 10, 15, 20% chance that she cut the damn thing. It's disgustingly, she cut Lords of Dog. I mean, I'm just going through the list going, oh my God, really? Constantine. She cut Constantine. She cut $1 Million Baby. Her body of work and her legacy is just shockingly immense. And anyway, I thought might be kind of just fun to pay homage to her. And so I picked a movie that she cut. You don't have to, because I know I'm dumping on Sonya at the last minute. So, I have my movie choice for you this week. Do you have yours?
Oh yeah.
All right, I'll give mine first. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
It's A Knight's Tale.
Oh wow, we were just watching that at work like 2 days ago.
There you go. So she cut it. It's one of my favorites from the 90s. I think it's the 90s, right? Please tell me it's the 90s.
Or early 2000s.
Or early 2000s. Yeah, I think it's actually early 2000s. But anyways, it's one of my favorites from that kind of genre. 2001. And it's a Heath Ledger film. Enjoyed quite a bit. So
yeah, there's only about 8 or so of those.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't done any of those yet. Episode 11.
It's also Brian Helgeland, who, as a filmmaker, I kind of admire. I think he's a pretty good dude.
All right, so we're going back to the aughts for A Knight's Tale, where We Will Rock You, where Queen, for real this time, not the Brian May from Down Under, but the Brian May.
This is the real Brian May. This is the real Brian May. That's right. They're going to shake you all night.
Some of the songs in A Knight's Tale. I remember when, not to get into that one, but I remember the early trailers were like, oh, it's anachronistic. It has rock music, but it's set in the past.
Yep.
So my choice is, we're going back to the 80s again, because, the 80s, they always rear their head. And, we were just at 1986 a few weeks ago with Manhattan Project. Let's go back to 1986 again.
Oh, this is going to be good. What do you got?
Let's watch Billy Crystal again. This
Billy
time
Crystal.
We're going to watch him with Gregory Hines and Running Scared.
Yep, Running Scared. I already knew what you were going to say.
It's another one where it's like, a movie I hadn't seen in a long time that was also ubiquitous to cable and VHS. Does it hold up? Is it worth looking at all? Or am I very surprised? Do I like it more now, or do I like it less? We'll find out next time.
I get the feeling that A Knight's Tale may be very polarizing, because I think it has it's like Firefly. It has a very strong fan base. We don't want to piss anybody off.
Yeah. And I have a feeling nobody will remember Running Scared. They'll think it's the Paul Walker movie. And it's like, no, this is the one from 86 where if you're our age, maybe the only thing you remember about it is Gregory Hines when they open that door and he flips off that little kid, because that little kid was flipping him off so much.
That's the dude from White Knights, by the way, kids. If you were in the 80s, you remember Gregory Hines was in White Knights. White Knights. Okay, well, all right. Running Scared and A Knight's Tale. Stay tuned. Yes. That'll be interesting.
The variety never ends on Talking Pondo.
All right, Marty. Until next week.
Cool. Thanks.
Later.